right, coming to you live from the Hadoop Summit here in Santa Clara. I'm here with Ken Krugler. Ken, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
So you are you're providing services in the greater ecosystem around Hadoop. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got into this business and what type of services you provide?
Okay. Well, I had a startup back in 2005 called Krugler, and we were using some open source projects. One of them was Nudge, which sort of split, and part of it became Hadoop. So we were actually using Hadoop before there was a Hadoop. And we were doing big web crawls and processing lots of data, billions of lines of source code, so we needed some solution that let us scale, and so we wound up using Hadoop back then. And since then, I started a consulting company called Bixo Labs, and we do custom data processing workflows using Hadoop, and we also, I do training. I teach a Hadoop class for Scale Unlimited.
So, and how have these things trended? And Hadoop's been around, what, for about 5-6 years now. Mm-hmm. I assume in the beginning there wasn't too much, and now it's probably ramped up quite a bit. How are you seeing that? Have we crossed the chasm?
I think so, because up until about 3 years ago, when you looked at who was using Hadoop, it was startups and of various sizes, but like LinkedIn, Facebook, those were the name, the rock stars, and then a bunch of other smaller companies all busy using Hadoop to process data. And now, if you look at the space, the acceleration of companies that are running out of headroom with traditional database solutions, and figuring they have ways they think they can make money off of all the data that they collect or generate. It's increasing quickly, and so now you see many more companies here that aren't classic startups or cutting edge companies trying to figure out how they can use Hadoop to solve their problems. So I think it's reached the point where it's crossed over.
And then who are you teaching to, and has that changed as well? In other words, did you start talking to engineers and now maybe business process people, or is it still technical folks?
So it's two things. We teach a boot camp class, which is for the technical people. It's for the Java programmers, and that hasn't changed much. We also now have an intro to Hadoop class, and that's more for, a lot of people hear about Hadoop. Gosh, what does it all mean? And that's a half-day class that gives you the higher-level overview without doing so much diving into the coding side.
So to put you on the spot here, half-day class in 1 minute. If someone comes to you and said, "I've been reading about this Hadoop thing.
Right.
What the heck is a Hadoop?" what would you say to people?
Well, there's a couple different ways to answer the question. One is Hadoop is a way to process lots of data, big data. Another is Hadoop is an open source project, in the part of the Apache Foundation. You could say Hadoop is it's a giant virtual operating system that can let you take thousands of computers and treat them as one giant computer. Or you could say it's the name of a stuffed animal that Doug Cutting's child had, and he needed that for the name of a project.
Excellent. So would you describe this primarily as storage, analytics, both?
It's both. I mean, some people use Hadoop because it's a very cost-effective way to store lots of data in a reliable manner. And other people use Hadoop because they just need to process lots of data. And often it's a combination of the two. You have the data you've stored, and then you have to do something with it.
And then also, what sort of trends have you seen from the vantage point of what you've been offering in Hadoop?
Right. Well, one interesting trend is that the classic way people think about using Hadoop is you get a whole bunch of commodity hardware, cheap boxes that are your slaves that make up your cluster. And more now I see companies using what people are starting to call fat nodes, which are really high-end enterprise-grade servers for these slaves, and having fewer of them because they're looking at the ops cost, the rack space cost, etc., which I find interesting because it kind of goes against the initial sort of reason for existence of Hadoop or Hadoop-like solutions, which is how do you take a bunch of cheap boxes and harness them all together to do something useful. And now they're saying, well, we know we can do something useful with it, but we got to make sure we got a cluster that fits in our data center that we can maintain with the ops team we've got. And so they're going for these much higher-end servers from brand name manufacturers.
So how would you do, without getting too technical, how would you define one of these heavyweight servers? What are you talking about as far as a CPU or RAM,
Right.
or how would you size it?
So a classic Hadoop slave, for comparison, is maybe it's got 4 cores, it has 8 gigs, maybe 12 gigs of RAM, and it's got 4 drives, maybe 6 or 8 drives. And these boxes, often it's like 72 gigs of RAM, 24 real cores, 48 virtual, up to 16 drives. So, much more capacity, specifically in the CPUs and memory.
Excellent. Well, Ken Krugler, thank you so much.
Oh, glad to be here. Thanks.